Hey, it's Oz here and welcome to this short walkthrough on my recommended settings for Siteground hosting for your blog or your website. Okay, so let's get started. Now, the first thing you'll need to do, of course, is to log into Siteground, and you do that by going to siteground.com or .co.uk or whichever version of the website works for you locally, and just click on the login button here at the top. Okay, and once inside, you click on websites and that will take you to your website's dashboard. Now here you'll see however many websites you have hosted with Siteground. I happen to have a few, and that's why you see these different panels. So what you need to do is click on the Site Tools button that belongs to the panel of the website that you want to configure. So click on Site Tools and this will load the area that we need. Okay, so here we are, and you'll see that on the left hand side you have a navigation menu. Now in this area, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see your IP address and your name servers in case you need them. When you first sign up with Siteground, you'll have an email with those name servers, but if you do lose that email or you can't find it for whatever reason, you can always come here and go to this area and see your name servers. Okay, so on the left hand side, the first thing you need to do is click on Security and then on SSL Manager. When you first sign up for Siteground and you set up your hosting, you need to install the SSL. Otherwise, you'll get that error in Google that says website not safe or not accessible because it can't detect a secure certificate. Okay, so you'll see down here that I'm using Let's Encrypt, which is a free SSL certificate, and it's active and it's on my domain name. So all you do is here where it says install, you click the drop down and you select the domain name that you want to install the SSL on. So in this case, I'm going to click my domain name. They call me host.com, and then in the next drop down where it says select SSL, you click that and you select the type of SSL that you want to install. You need to click Let's Encrypt if you want the free SSL certificate. So you click Let's Encrypt and then you hit the Get button. I'm not going to do that obviously because I already have an SSL certificate on my domain name and it's active. Once you hit that Get button, magic will happen. You just sit back and wait and your SSL certificate will start to work on your domain name, and that may happen very quickly or in a few hours. It just depends. Okay, so once that's working and you can see it working, you want to go to HTTP enforce, and on your domain name you want to click that HTTPS enforce. And what this does is it forces your website to always use the HTTPS. So for example, if you type theycallmehost.com into a Google search bar and you hit enter, it will force the HTTPS version of my website. And then you can be sure that the communication between you and my website is secure. Okay, so let's go back to the dashboard. So that's the first thing you need to do. Once your SSL is set up and active, it's time to work on your website. Now, if you click on Site here on the left hand side, you'll see that you have a file manager where you can access your files should you need to, and you also have an FTP Accounts area where you can create an FTP account if you prefer to work via FTP. These two things are optional. You're not always going to need them when you're setting up a WordPress website. Okay, so now let's scroll down to the security section. You'll see here you have backups. And depending on the plan that you're on in Siteground, you're able to generate a backup on demand. Now, this is handy if you're going to make changes on your website. You want to first create a backup in case things go pear-shaped and you need to roll back. So the way you do that is you type something here that makes sense to you. For example, you may want to type in the date and the time, or you may want to put something that makes sense to you, like website backup before and then the name of whatever you worked on. For example, website backup before the contact form. Now, if you look below that, you'll see that there are system backups, and those backups take place every single day. So Siteground backs your website up at the same time every day, once a day. Now, regardless of this, I still recommend that you create a new backup every time you need to do something. It's just good practice, and it also ensures that you have the freshest possible copy of your website by taking that backup right before you start making changes. Now, we've dealt with SSL already. Let me show you the protected URLs section. If you wanted to protect one of your pages for whatever reason, you could always enter the path here and click on protect. Now, I don't use this feature. If I set up a private page on WordPress, I make it private from WordPress. But if you're hosting a HTML website, then you don't have that functionality, and this feature would come in handy. Now, there's also a blocked IPs section, and here you can actually block IPs or an IP range. Now, I don't use this feature here. I have a couple of plugins that I use for security, and if I need to block any IPs, I can do that from within the software. And finally, under security, you have Site Scanner, and if you buy Site Scanner or you have Site Scanner in your plan, you can force a scan on your website on demand, or just let the system do its daily scanning. Again, I don't use this feature in Siteground. My security plugins take care of that. Now let's click on speed. You'll notice here that we have a Cloudflare link. Now, I don't use Cloudflare on my blogs. When I have tested Cloudflare, for me, it slowed things down. There's something called first time to byte, and that's very slow in Cloudflare. But to be fair, that was on the free plan. I've never been on a paid plan in Cloudflare, and I can't speak about those. But if you want to test it for your site, what I recommend is that you first create a manual backup, and then you either click the activate free and set Cloudflare free, or you go for one of the premium accounts. Now, the next item is caching, and Siteground have their own caching plugin. So on your WordPress dashboard, simply go to your plugins area, add new, and find the Siteground plugin. Now, Siteground delivers caching server-side, which is a lot more effective than just using a simple caching plugin. You'll see that you have 3 caching levels here: Nginx, Dynamic Cache, and Memcached. At the moment, the Nginx Direct Delivery tab is active, and you can see that my domain name is selected. If I go to Dynamic Cache, you'll see that it says download the plugin, and within the plugin, click the toggle button next to Dynamic Cache. So you activate Dynamic Cache via the plugin on the website. That is the Siteground caching plugin. And then there is Memcached, and you can see here that my site is enabled for that. Now, every tab has a gray box here with some text, and that explains what that level of caching is actually doing. So I recommend that you read through that. But you can see that I have all 3 levels activated. Okay, so next let's go to the WordPress section. Here you can install and manage WordPress. If you've bought your hosting from Siteground and you haven't yet set up your WordPress website, this is where you do it. You can set up WordPress on its own, or you can set up WordPress plus WooCommerce. Next, you have a staging area, and this enables you to clone your website to a different folder or a different location so that you can work on the staging copy and make changes or updates. And once you're happy with that, you can push those changes from the staging site to the live site. Next, you have a migrator section. If you want to bring in a website from a different host, this is what you use. Now, Siteground do have a migrator plugin, and when you first sign up with Siteground, it will ask you if you're transferring a website from a different host. If you are, it will give you the plugin, and all you do is install the plugin on the website that you're transferring, set up a few things, click a button, and it's all done. Then you have an auto update section where you can decide if you want to have your updates applied automatically. And you see that you do have some control of that. You can opt to have major releases applied automatically, minor releases, or plugins. You'll see that I have my plugins switched on, so the plugins do update automatically, but you'll see that I have all major releases set to 24 hours. When there's a major release, I don't want that to be applied to my website automatically, just in case disaster happens. I'd like everybody else to try that while I watch and see what happens. Okay, so let's go to the domain section now. Okay, so on the park domains, you can add domains, and on the subdomains, you can create subdomains. You also have a redirects section where you can set up URL redirects. And we have the DNS zone editor, which is probably the one you're going to use most in this section. Here is where you can set up your A records, your scene names, your text records, and so on. Beneath that, we have email, and under accounts, you can create your mailboxes. Then we have forwarders, which I'm a big fan of, and here you can create all your mail forwarders. There is an autoresponder, which I've never used, and just so you know, this is not an autoresponder in the sense of the autoresponder that you would use when you're building an email list. This is simply an email autoresponder. So if you're on holiday, for example, and somebody emails you, you can set up a message here which auto responds and says, for example, I am out of the office. Okay, below that we have filters, and this is to help you automate email management. This is not something that I use. Then you have authentication, which I always leave as is. There's nothing that I've ever needed to set up here, but you do have a DKIM section. And if you work with email or you're using something like Office 365, then you may need to be in this section setting up a few things. And then you have spam protection. This is a spam filtering service that Siteground use and provide on their servers. If you have a mailbox, then that can help keep your spam down. Then you have a statistics section where you can see things like traffic, error logs, and access logs. I don't use the statistics section. I use Google Analytics and dashboards to analyze my data, but it might be handy to come here and check the error logs if you're debugging a problem. And finally, we have a devs section, which all developers will love. And here you have Cron Jobs, which is something that you may need to set up if you're using certain types of plugins that need to be run on a schedule. And you also have a PHP Manager, from where you can set up the PHP version that your WordPress site runs on. In this section, there's also a Git and a SSH keys manager section, which I never use. So to recap, the very first thing you'll need to do is go to Security, SSL Manager, and install your SSL, and then enforce your HTTPS. Those are the two things that I always do first. Once that's working, that's when I go through these settings and tweak the rest. All I use on all my installations are the caching section under speed, the DNS zone editor under domain, and the email section. Mostly the accounts. I usually set up 1 or 2 mailboxes and a few forwarders. The rest I seldom touch unless I need to do something specific, like setting up a subdomain, which you'll find under domains, or take a manual backup before I make some major changes, which you'll find under security, or upload a file via File Manager, or set up a FTP account. If you use those settings, you'll be good to go.